Johannesburg Stock Exchange is older than the city itself. It's been crucial in shaping the South African economy since its inception in the 18th century. Business reporter Ntokozo Khumalo examines how the JSE has changed the country during the first 3 decades of democracy.
A flurry of mining and financing companies setting up shop due to the Witwatersrand gold rush saw English businessman Benjamin Wollan establish the Johannesburg Stock Exchange on the 8th of November 1887, right here on the corner of Commissioner and Simmons Streets in downtown Joburg.
We were way bigger than any other country when it came to resources, simply that we had everything.
Wollan's Johannesburg Exchange and Chambers was the first company to be listed on the bourse, but his overall goal was to provide capital to gold mining companies that could not turn to the banks.
They had to go to find risk capital. They had to find people who wanted to take the risk that something would be found.
DRD Gold was one of the first companies to strike gold, becoming the oldest company listed on the JSE in 1895. Others include SAP Miller, PPC Cement, Sapi Limited and Barloworld. But only SAP Miller and PPC Cement have been listed for more than 100 years. By the time Shapiro joined the JSE floor as a runner 50 years later, South Africa was facing a new wave of resistance. Political parties and trade unions were becoming more powerful and widespread. And unrest, such as the Soweto Student Uprising of 1976, added to apartheid government's economic woes. That's at least until April 27, 1994.
In the 80s, our people were delivery people, tea people, driving motorcycles all over inner city Joburg to transfer scripts and cash all over the city. But in the late 80s, early 90s, we started to see Black people being employed inside the stockbroking firms as stockbrokers themselves. And of course, then with liberation and democracy in the mid-90s, we then started having this wave of BE transactions.
According to data from the Triple BE Commission's annual report for 2022-23, Black ownership on the JSE is regressing from the post-democracy years. Black ownership of businesses fell by 1.5 percentage points to under 30%, while Black management control also dropped by 5.4 percentage points to 51.6%. However, Black investors own a stake in the exchange through mandated investments such as pension funds. Markets were still riding the commodities high over the period, largely driven by demand from China. But according to Shapiro, the supercycle would not last forever.
But of course, that came to an end. And there were some really tough periods, certainly the financial crisis in 2008, 2009, which did bring our market crashing down.
The early 2000s also saw a stream of companies delisting from the bourse, and the trend has once again reared its head, with the exchange now having about 300 companies listed, more than half of what it was in 1994. And according to Alex Forbes, head of asset allocation, Mandisa Zavala, it's more than just the economic headwinds driving them away.
One of the things they talk about is with regards to regulation being stringent, but it is obviously a delicate balance because on the one side, the JSE will want to also protect investors and introduce regulations as well that align with South Africa. In other words, not making it easy for foreign companies to come and list on the JSE. So from that perspective, you can see it, but also, it may hinder the growth of the stock exchange.
African Equity Empowerment Investments was one of the first Black companies to list on the exchange in 1999. The company cited the illiquidity of shares and a challenging operating environment as its reasons for leaving the JSE. Makorosi says the hardest hit from the departure of such large players in the markets are small and medium-sized companies, but adds that the exchange is doing something about access to capital for that segment of the market.
We've changed some of our rules to make it easier to get onto the exchange and stay. But we've also launched additional products like the JSE private placements, which allows unlisted companies to raise capital through us. And we've helped SMEs raise over 100 million rand to date.
One thing they all agree on is that the JSE still has a vital role to play as the engine room of South Africa's economy.
30 years ago, the shares listed on the JSE were worth 700 billion rand, and now they're worth 18 trillion rand. And that talks to the long-term savings opportunity in the stock market. You know, it is a long, patient game, but if you play the game and hang on to your shares, there is good returns to be made in the long term.
Shapiro adds that the country has some work cut out for it to create an enabling environment.
The thing that we need to do, and after the election, is focus clearly on growth. You know, and I mean growth. We've got to relook at our investment policy and tailor it for what the world needs.
All of those things culminate in being the future prospective growth of South Africa. We could grow as an economy by just the average consumer or what government does. That's one avenue of it. But another avenue is also investment. And this is a huge part of that. So I think it definitely is, it will play a huge role going forward. And that's why it's important to not, rule South Africa out completely, because I do think there's aspects towards our local economy that could potentially get better.
For Newzroom Afrika on Channel 405, I'm Ntokozo Khumalo in Johannesburg.